All right, welcome back to Everyday Elevations, the podcast where we transform ordinary moments into extraordinary outcomes. Today, I'm excited because I have a guest here that is going to talk on a topic that we really haven't broached here yet on Everyday Elevations, other than in the initial episode where I talked about different buckets that I felt like I was personally lacking in. So with that, I'd love to introduce you to Cody Sizemore. Cody here is a financial coach who's committed to helping individuals achieve financial freedom and foster a healthy relationship with money. His approach integrates psychological insights, recognizing the importance of addressing mental and emotional barriers to financial success. So what he does is he guides clients in overcoming their limiting beliefs, which then enables informed decisions and goal achievement. So with that, Cody, I'd love to just let you tell a little bit about your origin story, like what got you into financial coaching and everything, and we'll go from there. And thanks so much for being on here.
Man. Yeah. Well, first and foremost, dude, thanks for having me on the show, man. Been looking forward to connecting with you. We spoke a few weeks back and excited, man. But yeah, as far as like what got me into it, it's a little bit of I would say it's probably a different journey than most in this kind of field, you know? So if you want to hop into a time machine and hop back like 10 years ago, I was in a very different place in my life. I was in the music industry, and I was in a touring band, and we were doing a lot of really good things. You know, like we were touring like all over the country. I think we played like 44 of the 48 continental states. We were recording with like a record or a multi-platinum record producer out in New York. We were talking to labels, playing all these big festivals. Everything was great. However, the one thing that really, really sucked on my end and that really held me back was my own personal finances. You know, I had like a ton of debt. I was really, really bad with like my spending habits. I had no savings, all these different types of things. And basically, man, it led me to living, you know, in that van because we were on the road probably like 8 or 9 months out of the year. But it left me living in that van, basically trying to survive off of like $3 to $5 a day. And that was it, you know, like just enough to like buy like, you know, like a banana, a bagel, and like, you know, a cold can of Chef Boyardee ravioli kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at first, man, I really was trying to embrace that and just be like, this is the starving artist, you know, like I'm gonna earn my stripes, and you know, it's all gonna be worth it one day. And the more and more that kept happening, eventually, dude, it just kind of like caught up to me. And there was one night that I remember very, very vividly. We were traveling through Oklahoma, and we were just somewhere in the middle of Oklahoma, probably like 2, 3 in the morning. And we had stopped at a rest stop to, you know, get gas and, you know, get a snack for the drive because we were driving through the night. And, you know, I got out of the van. I opened up my wallet to try and get some sort of food at the gas station. And there was no money in there. No money. And I was like, okay, no problem. Let me see what I got on my cards. Credit cards were maxed out. Then I was like, cool. I probably have something in my bank. So I pulled up my bank account and I had $1.03 in my bank account. And I was like in the middle of nowhere, thousands of miles from home at 3 in the morning. And I was just like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And how can I keep doing this to myself kind of thing? So I had this moment where I had to like take myself away from the rest of the band. I went into our trailer and I just like put my hands in my head in my hands, and it just started breaking down. And I came to the realization that like I couldn't keep this going. It was insustainable. That's really what was going on. So when we got back home from that tour, you know, I had to kind of talk to the guys, and I just said, hey, like I can't keep doing this. Like, you know, we have all these things going on, but with anything in the music industry, like it's not ever like a guaranteed thing. It's usually like a prolonged kind of like several step kind of process before things really start to come to fruition. And I was at my wit's end. So I had to end up taking a step back from the band. And long story short, my dream died because of money. And that's really what it came down to. And when that happened, I got kind of like kind of pissed off, to be honest with you. And I was like, never again am I ever going to allow money to dictate how my life turns out. So I went on like this like crusade of trying to figure out everything about money so that I could figure my own situation out and just get it taken care of so I can step into my new, life path. And a big part of that was actually me reaching out for support because I had no idea anything about it or what I was doing wrong. I just knew that it wasn't right. So I actually hired my own financial coach, and that whole process completely changed my life. Like, not even just my finances, but like my mental health got better, my physical health got better, my relationships got better, my communication skills got better. Literally everything just started to skyrocket. And eventually, when I got myself into a really good position and I was feeling confident, I had a moment with myself and I was like, this is like too good. This is too good to keep to myself. And I want to help other people feel this too, because I know for a fact that there are other people who have these big dreams, have these big goals, have these big aspirations that feel like they can't because they're being held back from money. So I made that decision that I was like, I'm going to get the training. I'm going to go through, the certifications, and I'm going to launch my own practice to help people. And I ended up doing that just over 4 years ago. And ever since then, it's been amazing, man. I've been able to help out a lot of people. And, collectively speaking, the people that I have been able to help, whether it be paying off their debt, building up their savings, buying houses, making investments, whatever it may be, collectively, they have seen a positive shift in their finances of over $4 million to date. And that's just what I can track, so it's been a really amazing ride, dude. And honestly, like, I never, ever, ever thought that I would say this, but this helping people with their finances has become more of a passion for me than music really ever was. So it was kind of like a blessing in disguise. It's weird how that kind of works sometimes, but it was a blessing, man. And that's my story. That's how I got here.
I love it. I actually want to touch base on two different parts of the story you told here, just to get a little bit more of a picture. Because not all of us have been touring successfully or anything like that when it comes to music. So you mentioned the fact that you were struggling financially. Was it more so that you were just irresponsible with money, or a mixture of you weren't really making a ton of money because it's not like you're selling out stadium tours or anything like that?
Yeah.
Is it kind of like a mix of both of those was kind of causing that financial issue?
Yeah, it's a mix of both. Like the money that the band made, it was enough to like keep the band going, and even to like make different investments, like recording an album or buying merch or stuff like that, right? But we weren't making enough to where we could like really start paying ourselves a considerable amount. We got a little bit, but most of the money just went back into the band. So, that's where the band was. But it really came down to just personal decisions, personal behaviors, and, me getting myself into a hole while I was home that like was really difficult to dig out of when I was on the road, So kind of a mix of both.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense. And it's kind of cool just hearing how you talk about the whole process of the band, because it's almost like starting business. So actually, it's pretty much just like starting a business, because when you first start off, I haven't started a business, but I know how it works. Basically, you're reinvesting your money at all times. So initially, if you're a properly ran business, you're not paying yourself out early on. You're reinvesting into the company. So like band, that's kind of what's happened there. So that's where some of the financial issues, of course, decision making and stuff like that too. But it's just cool hearing that. I've never really heard of, because my brother's been in bands and I have a lot of friends who are in bands. And
Mm-hmm.
well, used to be in bands. Now we're all 40 plus. So don't need to be in band. I'm not trying to be Kiss be out there and rocking around in tours or anything like that at this point.
Right.
I guess we're at that level of fame you could, but no, I just think it's so fascinating to me. And that's a tangent, but yeah. So let me ask you this. So you pull away from the band because financial concerns and just couldn't keep going through that um, same outcome time and time again with it.
Mm-hmm.
What allowed you to commit to a financial coach? Because they're not necessarily cheap. They're not super expensive depending on the coaching. But if you're already in a financial place, the reason why I ask this question is because there's a lot of people who hesitate on coaching, myself included, coaching in general, because maybe you're not in the best financial space or you're not sure if you can afford just that coaching. So I'm curious, coming from the fact where you were mentally like, hey, like I can't do this. I'm in a bad financial place, but you're like, I do need to pay for this coaching so I can get to that better place. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about that mindset and what decision-making process on that.
Yeah, so there's two sides of it. Number one is that, like, you know, if you find someone who really cares about you and is not just like trying to get paid, they'll work with you. You know, like there's a lot of different options that you can do to just get creative and just be flexible. You know, like if someone's wanting help, then someone who has like a heart for people and like wants to actually help them, they're not going to allow, you know, a price tag to stand in the way of creating an impact, you know? So the person that I, you know, hired was one of those people who really just cared about helping me. It was like, hey, like we can do this. We can do this. I just want to get started with you, you know? So I was very blessed to, you know, to hire someone and to find someone like that. Which is also why I do the same thing with people too. You know, I always tell people all the time, I'm like, the hardest part about coaching is getting started with it, you know? And so it's like, okay, like let's not allow that to be the thing that doesn't allow you to get help and doesn't allow you to, like, you know, make this a better situation for you, you know? So that's one side of it. The other side of it though, is also something that I had to realize myself and something that I have seen, dude, I'm not kidding you, man. So many times is that generally speaking, people actually have more money than they realize. That's just the fact. And what sucks is like we just don't realize what's happening to it, and we kind of put ourselves in these positions to where we feel like there isn't enough all the time. And that was my case, you know, like, I had learned that once I got into coaching and I saw like, hey, what's actually happening to my money and where is it actually going and why is it happening that way? And, you know, what's causing these things and all these different types of things. Once we get to the bottom of that, it actually starts to free up a lot more, you know, and it starts to like actually work for you. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you, Jason, I have brought on people to where like I will go in, you know, and we'll start coaching. And I'll kind of do like what I would call like a money assessment plan, which basically is like, hey, what has been happening to your money? And then how can we refine it in a way that's going to serve you for both your goals, but also what you value at the same time moving forward. And what was happening to it was that these people were going like in the negative, like in the deficit, you know, and like putting stuff on credit cards or whatever it might be, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month, every single month. But then after we kind of talked about it and we said, okay, so what about this area? Like what's going to make you feel like you're good to go and like you feel very comfortable, but at the same time, like we're being intentional towards the reason that we're here. And I've seen them move from either hundreds or thousands of dollars in the deficit to then flip it to hundreds or thousands of dollars in the positive. You know, like perfect example. I was working with this woman out in Florida. We just wrapped up her coaching in about a month ago. And when I first met her, you know, she's blessed with a good income, you know, but she was living quote unquote paycheck to paycheck, a lot of debt, absolutely no savings, decent income. And she was in the negative about $3,000 a month. That's how she was living. And then after we did this thing, we got her into a surplus of $4,000 a month.
Nice.
That's a $7,000 turnaround per month, you know? So, I mean, you do the math there and it's like, okay, 6 months later, she paid off about 20 to 25 grand in debt and freed up all this additional income. So now her surplus is no longer 4,000, it's more like 5,500. And she's just continuing to just rock and roll every single month after that. But she's been struggling with this for 15 years. You know what I mean? So that's another side of it. There's the flexibility of, finding the right person who has that good heart that wants to be flexible with you and wants to actually help you. And then there's the other side of it where it's like, you actually have money. It's just that it's not being utilized properly. And, we need to kind of unlock it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense actually, because I've been going through, I'm getting ready to buy a house and closing on the contract here on Friday. So
awesome. Congrats, man. That's great.
Thank you. But also scares the crap out of me financially speaking.
Yep.
But it
made
big
me, step.
Yeah, it's huge. So now the fiance is stuck with me. We have a baby and a house. You can't get away. No.
Yeah, that's right, man.
But I was going through my finances like, why am I paying for this app? I don't even use it. Like, I don't need this. I had a lot of things that correlated with my podcast, like to make things easier, AI related programs. I'm like, I don't even need these anymore. They were things that I used initially. And then I realized, okay, I can do this better myself than AI ever can. And it takes me more time to fix the AI mistakes than it does for me just do it myself. But it was one of those things initially I was trying to find quick hacks to get stuff done. So I was paying for that. But I just really went through all my finances like, okay, do I need this? No, this. Paying for cable, and cable's the stupidest purchase I've made. Although I didn't want to. I did that for when my fiance was pregnant. So otherwise I've been cable free for decades at this point. And then just went through all that. So when you talk about that, I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. I realized I had a lot more income than I realized if I started cutting back on stuff, even ordering supplements. So I'm working on ways for myself to save money by just partnering with companies. Like, hey, be a sponsor. Send me your product. Be on my podcast. Like, see it. Find ways to win. Like, and this way I can still get everything I need and mentally be better off. Because you mentioned that mental health aspect. That's a huge thing I realized once I took on the job I'm currently working, which is HR. I was in a dead end job, and I shouldn't say dead end. It wasn't a career path that I was willing to go into. My supervisor was like the next step up for if I move forward in the position. I call it office dad, but I was a facilities coordinator for 8 different offices. So make sure their offices were running correctly. New hires come in, they get all the paperwork done, yada, yada, yada. All the basic facility stuff. But I realized that's not something I really want to do long term. And I got this job. I was like, okay, cool. I'm making more money. I'm a lot happier now. So that little finance, because I was really underpaid for Colorado area for that previous job, is enough to sustain, but not enough to enjoy myself. And this job, a much better area. But it's just, sorry, very long tangent. But I just one of those things talking to you in the conversation. I was like, yeah, this makes perfect sense. I completely relate because I've not same story, but similar situations where I realized that there's, like you said, there's a lot more money we have than we really know. So we don't really see, we don't pay attention because it's so easy to just subscribe to something and forget about it. Prime example, Planet Fitness. I've had Planet Fitness for a decade. I've probably gone in 100 times in the past 10 years.
Right.
Because they charge you so little, you don't think about it.
Yeah. And, so the subscriptions, that's something that that's a thing for sure. But I'll be honest with you, man, I think it has even more to do with like just those small purchases. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. So it's not necessarily like, like a subscription, but it's like, this thing on the way home, or, you see this thing online and you just, click it and, it's $50. What's $50? Like that kind of thing. Right. But those small things, they don't feel like they're going to be causing much of an issue just because like, it's small, it's nothing too crazy to think about. But then you add them all together and they actually become very big, So that's one thing I hear from people all the time is like, they say, I don't make massive purchases. I'm not out here spending hundreds or thousands of dollars, but I don't understand what happens to all my money. And it's that, and then we have to understand like, okay, but why does that actually happen? Like, why are you actually, making these impulsive decisions, or why are you, making these $10 to $20 purchases every day on the way home from work or the way into work or while you're at work, whatever it might be. And that's where the money psychology really does start to come into play. Everyone has their own reason, their own trigger, or their own sort of like desired outcome of why they're spending money in a certain way or why they're not spending money in a certain way too. And that's what I found has been like the most interesting part of coaching. And what actually helps people the most is like not just understanding like what's happening to their money on a spreadsheet, but really understanding their own relationship with money, and understanding like themselves on a deeper level so that they can like identify, hey, this is what's happening. This is why it's happening. This is where it's coming from. And most importantly, like this is how I can overcome these things so that I can like take this power back and actually like explode towards the life that I deserve and want to live, But until people figure that out, it's really tough to make the money work because otherwise you're kind of it's almost like you're hopping into a car and you don't have any sort of like GPS, and you're going to a new destination that you haven't been before, and you're like, this road seems like the right one, I think. And then you just drive and you just go, I hope I get there. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like that. But once we understand it and we have like that clear path and that clarity, it really changes the game for you like a lot.
That makes sense. As I was evaluating my finances, I pay attention. You're right. There's a lot of things that look like, oh, $17 at the grocery store here, no big deal. But you do that over the course of a week, that's a whole heck of a lot more money. It still might not seem like much, but you add it up over a month, it's a lot more money. That's something that I know as I was doing. I was like, okay, well, what am I buying that's actually essential? What am I buying that's not? Can I cut some of this stuff out? And a lot of it was like similar to the story you were saying where someone will just, it's convenience, right? You're on your way home. So maybe go here, pick something up really quick versus for me, Uber Eats was the devil. I deleted that app.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah.
It's such a colossal waste of money, but
it's just because it's so much more expensive as compared to just going there and getting it, like just so much more expensive. So, and one thing I want to say, Jason, is like, I think there's nothing wrong with spending money. Like I'm not that person. And there's a lot of these people, especially in like the space that I'm in, where they're like, if you're trying to save money, you're trying to get yourself out of debt, then you should not be spending any money. You shouldn't be enjoying your life. You shouldn't be taking a vacation. You shouldn't be. I don't agree with that. I personally don't. I think that you need to be intentional with it on both ends of like being intentional with your goals, but then also being intentional with like your values and what you actually want in life too. Because dude, if someone is going like so scorched earth where they don't allow themselves to go out to eat, they don't allow themselves to go to the baseball game, they don't allow themselves to take that weekend trip while they're trying to get themselves out of debt, what they're going to do is they're going to harbor this like scarcity mindset about money. And two things are going to happen. They're either going to get really burnt out and they're going to end up resenting the whole process, which is going to lead to them having like a eventual like really big binge spending spree. And then they're going to look at that. They're going to feel ashamed. They're going to feel angry. And then they're not going to want to address it. They're going to want to avoid it because they're upset with themselves or they're upset with the whole process of it too. And that doesn't help. But let's say that doesn't happen to someone and they just keep going. Like they just keep not spending money and they keep saying no to all their friends. They keep saying no to all their family. They keep saying no to themselves. over and over and over and over. And then they get themselves out of that debt. They get the money in the bank that they're looking for. But then they've been doing that for so long that they've conditioned that scarcity mindset in their brain to where they won't know how to actually enjoy the money when they get to the place where they feel like they do deserve to enjoy it. So then they're going to be at that place where all the boxes are checked and everything's great, but they've just screwed up their relationship with money so much that they're going to be free, but they're going to feel like they're in that self-made prison because they're going to be like, well, how do I even enjoy this? And if I feel like I do enjoy it, I feel like I'm doing something wrong, you know? So that's why I don't think that, just cutting back and cutting back and cutting back is the answer. I think that the word is intentional, not even balance. It just has to be intentional, So I think that's really important.
No, that's a great distinction there. Because there's no point in having money if you're not going to enjoy your life.
Yeah, exactly. No matter where you're at in the journey, of course, like if you're out of debt and you have money in the bank, sure, like enjoy yourself more, as compared to not. But just because you're not at that place doesn't mean that you don't deserve to have a life. Like you should have a life.
We only get one, I guess, depending on religion. Right. But I love the fact that you touch up on that and kind of clarify a little more, because it's something that I personally have always been of the belief that, hey, I've had a slight money scarcity mindset ever since having this kid, of course. But for me, it's a matter of, I also know that I'm not going to be happy in life if I'm not going out and experience it. And a lot of times experiencing life will cost you a little bit of money. It's okay. Money will always come back as long as you're sitting there working and finding ways to make money work for you. And like you said, be intentional with your spending. You'll be able to get back there. Of course, maybe if you're not doing great financially, don't try and go to Abu Dhabi or something like that. Like maybe make more local trips. But
yeah.
But I love the fact you touch on that. So talk about I love that you talk about psychology of money. So I remember you mentioned something about an 80-20 principle on our pre-call. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So what I was kind of mentioning before was one thing that I have realized about personal finance in particular is like 20% of it has to do with the money itself, like the cash, the bank account, the budget, like whatever it might be, right? It seems like it should be all like 100% about that. But really what I have found is that it's actually only 20%. But the other 80%, it has to do with the people behind the money, So like what's going on in their hearts, what's going on in their minds, and really pulling the best out of you, So I think that there's like two phases to that. Number one would be like trying to understand what has been happening and, identifying those things that are maybe like pain points that people have with money, or even like their upbringing around money, right? And just understanding that so we can understand like, hey, this is why these, destructive behaviors or destructive belief systems around money are actually happening. This is why they're happening. But I think the other side of it too is also not focusing on like what has been, but instead what will be, to the fact of like, I think it's really important for people to understand like why they want to accomplish these goals in the first place. I talk to people a lot, dude, and I'll ask them like, what are your goals and why do you want it? And they'll say things like, we want to get out of debt. We want to build up our savings. We want a house. And why do we want it? Just because we don't want to feel like we're stressed out all the time. I want to be able to travel and, live my life. And that's really what it comes down to. But like, if we're being honest, those are really surface level. Like they're not like anything that's like, I have to have this kind of thing. It's more so of just like, I just don't want to be stressed. It's surface level. So what I mean by that other 80% is like, we need to be able to find things within your heart, things within your mind that matter to you enough and that are like actually worth fighting for, that it's going to create that drive in you. It's going to create that inspiration and that motivation and that aspiration, all the Shin's words, right? And it's also going to allow you to have like some sort of like grappling hook. So think about Batman, right? When he's in trouble, he pulls out his grappling hook and he just like gets out of there, right? It's the same thing. Like, if there was a car breakdown or a job loss or an unexpected medical expense that really sets you back financially, a lot of people would feel that blow and they would be like, I just put in all this work and this happened. Like, what's the point? Right. But having something that's going to keep you going no matter what, I think is really, really important. And you need to identify that and have it be something that's really, really deep, like something that actually matters to you, to where you're going to not want to give up, kind of thing. Like, it's bigger than you. It's bigger than the stress that you're trying to get away from. It's bigger than that trip that you're trying to take. It's a more purpose-filled mission, kind of thing. And talking about the what has been kind of thing, there are several things that happen with people, and I always say all the time, like, personal finance at the end of the day, it's personal. Like, there is no cookie cutter thing for any, one person kind of thing. Like, everything is unique to the individual, but there are certain trends that I have noticed. And one of those big trends is that people will spend money in a certain way because they're trying to get some sense of control of their life. So what I mean by this is, maybe as they were growing up, they grew up in a house that was not super well off. And, they weren't able to have the nice things, or their friends were able to have it, but they couldn't. Maybe they grew up in a broken home with divorce, and that happened, when they were, 7, 10, 12 years old. Maybe they grew up in an abusive house. A number of things that just are not in a child's control or a teenager's control. It's just the cards that they were dealt, kind of thing. Well, then they grow up, they move out, and they get their own sense of autonomy, their own sense of freedom, and they start making big girl money, big boy money with their big girl job or their big boy job. And then all of a sudden they're like, this is my life. I can actually choose what I get to do or what I want to do. And just having that ability is good enough for me. Even if it means that, like, it's going to put me in a position that is like not the best, it doesn't matter, because at least I have the ability to choose. I have the ability to have that control over my life. So that very thing that they're going after, which is that sense of control, is actually the thing that's putting their finances out of control. And it's a really weird paradigm, because the difference is that when they were growing up, whether it be financial related, the relationship with their parents, the dynamic of their household, whatever it might be, they didn't have that choice. But now they're putting themselves in a similar position willingly. And it is their choice now. But it just feels different because they think that for some reason the outcome is going to be different, when really it's not. They're just willingly putting themselves back into that place. And when people realize that, dude, they're like, wow, I've been trying so hard to run away from this thing. But what I've actually been doing is just running in circles and keeping myself in this track of destruction. Just realizing that is a huge first step, that you can then ask the question, okay, well then how do I overcome it? But realizing it is the very first thing you need to do. And that's where a lot of like the money psychology comes into play.
Makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I've never really thought that in depth about it. So heck, maybe I need some financial coach at this point. I feel pretty good about my finances, but there's probably some unhealthy habits I need to break and mentalities behind it. So I might be reaching out after this call here. I'm definitely going to set up a call with a group that I participate in. the one of my friends set up where we just talk about different things because one person in the group, there's multiple that have different financial questions, but one I mentioned this to you before, like his thought process is, oh, I have to make $300 million. No real reason why, but his mentality is always, I have to make this to be successful in life. And it's pushed him the whole time. It's also pulled him away from other areas in life and doesn't allow him to enjoy life. And I told him, I was like, dude, like, even if you're making $300 million, if you're not going out enjoying life, then you're not living. You're just going through the motions. Like that sounds awful to me. I'd rather make 60K and be able to go out and enjoy myself than make 300 million and be stuck at home focused on making more money.
Right.
Like that's me personally. But yeah, again, I like to go on tangents if you haven't picked up on that yet.
No, you're good, man. I mean, there's a lot of people like that, you know? I mean, granted, I've never talked to this guy. I don't even know his name. But like, there's something going on there. There's something going on there. There's some sort of self-worth kind of tie that he has with like, you know, how he feels about himself as compared to how much money he's making or how much he has kind of thing. So there's something going on there. It just needs to be dug and figured out, again, to be specific to him. You know, I had a client who he's a business coach and you know, he makes good money. You know, he makes like like 350, 400,000 a year. But he has no money. You know, like because he has all these different, you know, debts in place and everything like that. So all the money he's bringing in is basically just paying for his expenses. That's basically it. And, you know, his big goal was like, I want to scale my business to, you know, make $1 million a year. And I was like, okay, well, which business would you rather have? Would you rather have a business that makes $1 million, but you only bring home 100,000 after expenses? Or would you rather have a business that makes 500,000, but you bring home 250,000 after expenses? And he said, well, I'd rather bring home 250 as compared to 100,000. And I said, yeah, exactly, man. So like the goal isn't revenue. The goal is profit for you. Right. And the goal is like comfortability and stability and you know, security for your family and for your kids so that you can invest into their lives even more, not a number, you know? And when he realized that, he's like, so I need to shift my focus from trying to scale my revenue to instead lowering my expenses, because when I do that, and what I mean by lowering expenses is like paying off these debts, right? And he said, because when I do that, I'm essentially making more money. And I'm like, yes, exactly. So it might be something similar to that. I don't know, but that's just one example I had from a previous client that I had recently as well.
Well, no, I appreciate that. And I don't know the whole background to it. I know there's some like familiar mentality behind it. But again, it wasn't my group or anything like that. So it was just someone that I recognized. And I was like, oh, so when you reached out, it was actually perfect time because right when we did this week where we had that call, we were talking about financial mentalities and stuff and mindsets. So it was just kind of really funny that you reached out. I was like, oh, this is just meant to be. So,
yeah.
But let me, because we don't have a ton of time left here. I would love to see if you can give us a couple quick tips, or if there are quick tips for people who are trying to just get themselves a little bit more out of debt, ways to turn that around as quick and effectively as possible.
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned earlier, personal finance is personal. So, you know, what I might say maybe applies to someone, maybe it doesn't. But, you know, I can at least do my best with this.
Sure.
I would say that, you know, the number one thing that you should do, there's really two things that you should do. Number one would be to look back and just see like what has been happening with my money. You know, kind of do like an audit on yourself. You know, like go through your transaction histories and start highlighting them in certain colors for different categories or, you know, different reasons as to why you spent the money. And then, you know, you might find that there's a lot of spending that's going on that you don't really know why you spent it. or you spent it because it was just like an empty kind of thing. Like it was nice in the moment, but then the next day it's gone kind of thing, you know? So just recognizing like, hey, maybe I have more money than I think is number one, right? And then number two is, I have found that there's a certain method of paying off debt that's been proven to be like the quickest and most efficient process. And this is over millions of case studies, not just the people I've worked with, but well beyond me. And this is a process called the debt snowball. Have you heard of that or no?
I've heard of it, but refresh my mind.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So what a lot of people will do is, let's say if someone has like 10 different lines of credit, right? Or lines of debt, right? What a lot of people will do is they'll see that they have 10 different debts. They'll get kind of overwhelmed by the fact that they have 10 different lines. So they'll try and like consolidate the loans, or they'll try and like, refinance them or whatever it might be, right? So they take the 10 and they lump it into one big one to make it more like, I only got one thing to worry about and that's it. That's not the way to go. It's not the way to go. It actually slows down your progress a ton. And the reason for this is what I'm going to kind of unpack with the debt snowball. So with the debt snowball, basically what you do is you keep all those debts separate, regardless of, interest rates, balances, payments, whatever. But you keep them all separate and then you line them up in an order of smallest balance to largest balance owed. And then you just squeeze out as much extra income as you can on a monthly basis. And then you start attacking that smallest debt like as fast as you can, right? So let's say like your smallest one's like $1,000, let's just say. So you pay that one off very aggressively. Maybe it takes you a month or two to pay off. And then the payment on that debt, let's say it's $100, you take that $100 payment and you don't bring it home and work it into your daily living habits. You just pretend like you never freed it up in the first place. And you take that payment and you basically stack it on top of the second smallest debt. And then you start paying that one off really aggressively. And then once that one's paid off, maybe that one's a $150 payment. Now you have $250 and you take those two payments and you stack it on top of the next smallest debt. And then you just repeat the process, rinse and repeat over and over and over. And the benefit of doing it this way is that, number one, you are paying off debts a lot quicker because, they're smaller, right? So you actually get like that sense of like accomplishment. You actually feel like you're doing something, and that accomplishment, that progress, it lights you on fire. It makes you want to get the next one even more kind of thing, right? Whereas if you put everything in one big one, let's say it's like one big $100,000 loan, it's going to take you forever to feel that first win, and it's going to feel exhausting. But if you just leave them separate, then all of a sudden you get those wins under your belt and you start to really feel that progression and you start to get excited about it. But then not only that, is that with every debt that you pay off, you then free up more income because you have less payments to make as well. And then that extra money that you're putting towards the next debt just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until you get to that last debt that you're working on and you've freed up all other 9 payments of that. And you've had all other 9 wins of that. And you're like, this is the last nail in the coffin. I'm going to the bank with this one. And you just get after it, bro. Like, so that's kind of how the whole debt snowball process works. And mathematically, it makes sense because you're freeing up income throughout the whole process. But I think that like mentally and emotionally, it makes a lot of sense because you're getting those wins, you're getting those accomplishments, you're tightening that belt, that financial belt with every debt that you pay off. And it feels really rewarding throughout the whole process. You feel like you're actually doing something. You feel like you're moving forward. And I think that's a massive part of getting out of debt is not focusing only on the numbers, but really focusing on like the mental and emotional side of things too.
Yeah, to create little victories with it. I like to call it like a victory vault for every time you get a win in life. Throw in that victory vault. So this way rather than focus on the things that are going wrong, you can look at that victory vault. And I forget who coined that term too, by the way. I gotta look that up again. I used to know.
Might be like it. So I never heard victory vault, but I know that David Goggins talks about his cookie jar. So it's kind of similar.
Yeah. There was someone that specifically said victory vault. When I said that, I was like, I love that. I love the concept of it because you just put these wins into this vault so you can open them up on a rainy day and be like, hey, here's where I'm succeeding at. This is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same thing with the snowball effect. It's like you're compounding those victories and you keep going, and rather than worry about where you were or how much that you have left, you just know that, hey, I'm plugging away chipping away each single day or week or whatever, however you're paying it, and you're getting more and more wins. So I love that. It makes sense for me because I'm the type of guy that's very strategic when I do, and I like to chip away at things. Very methodical in my mindset. So that one completely like resonates with me.
Good, man.
Yeah. Well, and thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on this call here. There's a lot of amazing tips I'm going to pull out of here. And I know the audience is going to love this. But with that, getting close to end here. So I want to just ask a couple questions that aren't related to this at all. I always love to ask these two questions. And the first one, it's a two-parter, and I'm going to make a caveat with this. And you'll know what I'm talking about in just a second. All right, what is your superpower? And it can't be financial. So I want to know what your superpower is outside of that. And if you could have a superpower, whether it's comic book related or maybe you want something like empathy or anything like that, what would that superpower be?
Yeah, man. Okay. So what is my superpower? I would say that I have a really good ability to hear what people are not saying, but it's what they actually mean. You know what I mean? If I ask someone like a question, they'll respond and I'll be like, this is what they're actually saying, or this is what they actually mean. So I feel like I understand people on a deeper level that maybe they never even thought about themselves. Perfect example, your friend, the $300 million guy. I was like, probably something with self-worth there, like, so I think that that's probably my superpower, which I think is it's a huge blessing. My wife loves it, so that's good. But as far as the superpower that I would love to have, dude, I've always thought this would be sweet, bro, just to fly. I mean, like, come on, like the experience of it, like no traffic, like all that kind of stuff. Dude, I would love to fly. And that feeling of just freedom. Now I'm bald, but like theoretically speaking, having that wind blow through my hair, bro, game over.
It's fair. See, I'm more of a teleportation guy. I want to get to as many places as I want. Like, think about it. If you want to take your wife on a romantic date in France, Paris, boom. You don't need to book a hotel.
Instantaneous.
You just you just book a reservation. You're there. Like that's something that'd be cool for me. Now I get the flying part because getting that whole experience. And I had someone, you're the second person to tell me fly, and someone mentioned they love the idea of getting a different perspective by being so high up. Like, oh, okay, I can see it. That'd be kind of cool. And of course, I wouldn't mind the wind blowing in my hair. Not to rub that in on you, but
hey, man, it's all right. I get it all the time.
Fair enough. All right, so I got one final question here, and this one always brings about interesting answers. Don't you ruin this for me, by the way. I've never had someone say the same quote on this show in 20. So I've recorded 32 episodes at this point, and not once have I gotten the same answer. So if there is any quote that you would put on your gravestone, like something that you would live by and you want to be known by, what would that quote be?
Oh man. There's three that come to mind. But if I was thinking like my gravestone, I would put one by Henry Ford. which is whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And dude, that's just so true. So true. If you think you can, you're right. If you think you can't, you're right.
Just mindset.
Yeah, that's a really powerful one.
Yeah. I'm actually surprised that has not been used yet. So
I keep the streak alive.
The streak is still alive. Got a 33 game hitting streak now.
Yep.
Put me in the majors. But so I hear that quote all the time. Obviously, it's an incredibly famous quote, but still super underrated too. Like, it took me a while to realize that the words you speak to yourself matter. Things you say matter. I honestly, probably not until this past year, I didn't think too much of it. I've had plenty of people talk to me about it, but I didn't realize until actually I ran this marathon how important the words I say are. I kept telling myself before that, like I was one of those people who would quit 80% in, right? Like I'd hit a wall, like, okay, I'm good. I'm not going to try any harder than I just did. But I did this marathon attempt and I ran until my body gave out at 23 and a half miles with zero training. And it was just a mentality thing. Like, just all I have to do is just take one step at a time. Forward progress is all I need in life. And it's been a huge game changer for me. So your quote is incredible. Obviously very well known, but I love it so much because it's such an underrated concept. But with that, I just want to thank you for being on, of course. And I want to thank all the listeners for tuning in here. If you enjoy this episode, do us a favor, like, subscribe, leave a detailed review. Let us know what you liked about it, what you might want to learn a little bit more about. And then also don't forget to check me out at Instagram. And this will also be out on YouTube now. But on Instagram, you can find me at Everyday Elevations. For YouTube, it's Everyday Elevations Podcast. And then you can also find a blog that I'm getting ready to release here called The Wellness Diaries at everydayelevationspodcast.com. So look out for those. And thanks again for everybody for tuning in. And Cody, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be on.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me, man. It was a fun conversation. And I'm excited for you, man. I remember you told me that you started this podcast really just to help yourself in a lot of ways with those different buckets. And I think that's really cool, man, because not only are you helping you, you're also helping other people too throughout that whole journey. So absolutely love that, man. And yeah, I'm blessed to be on this show. So thank you.
Thank you.